I'm joined again by Sygnum Head of Investment Research, Katalin Tischhauser. How are you, Katalin?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good, especially with, the market being more positive. I'm doing very good.
Yeah, and you're very appropriately dressed in sort of Bitcoin orange, which is fantastic timing as always. So also, as always, nothing today is considered investment advice. The theme for today is fake news but real rally. Last month, Katalin, we talked about the bear market was a bit like being a long road trip, where the destination always seemed to be a little bit further down the road. We now seem to be getting close, or are we? So today we're going to talk about Bitcoin, talk about the rally and what might influence that, and then finish off by talking about it's not only Bitcoin. So if okay with you, Katalin, let's get started.
Sure.
So for Bitcoin, there were several pieces of fake news that moved the Bitcoin price. So in your take, what happened? What do you think was behind this?
The market actually wasn't pricing in the real news for months. Analysts generally rated the probability of the Bitcoin spot ETF approval as very high. We could see sort of various probabilities quoted as 90%, 75%, 80%. This was the consensus, but the Bitcoin price discounted basically 0% probability. So this was an anomaly, and it eventually got corrected. But certainly how it happened was quite odd. There were two pieces of fake news that circulated within a few days of each other. One of them, a social media account, put out a news item saying Bloomberg reports that the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF was approved. And then this account kind of went quiet, but the news was picked up by media outlets. It started spreading, and it actually spurred a rally, which carried on even after BlackRock denied the news. Then there was a second sort of similar incident a few days later when people started talking about how the DTCC settlement system in the US just added the BlackRock ETF, and this means it's about to start trading. Now, it wasn't just added, it had been there for months, and it doesn't mean that it was about to start trading. So, but as you say, the news were fake, but the rally was real.
So we talked before about what could trigger a rally. Do you think that there were specific metrics at play, or do you think this is purely a narrative, a change of narrative? And I guess if it was only narrative, does that actually matter?
Yeah, I mean, basically the narrative caught up with the reality. It's for the first half of the year, the news flow was on balance negative. Lots of bad things happened, especially on the regulatory front. And then in the summer, this turned around. The news flow became positive. Of course, the BlackRock ETF filing and the other various spot ETF filings, news flow around that was supportive, that the approval was likely, but also other things on lots of or numerous wins in lawsuits for crypto, not least versus the SEC, and various positive developments. And for a long time, none of this was priced in. So it is significant that the narrative turned because it caught up with reality.
Okay. So the narrative, to refer to what you're saying, is Bitcoin is a safe haven. It's been circulating for some time, maybe even years. With all the uncertainty that's going on right now, macro environment, geopolitical instability, waiting on approvals, court cases, etc., in various places. Has this safe haven narrative getting more traction in your view lately?
Oh, very much so. Yes, it is now the dominant narrative on Bitcoin. It's even propagated by people like Larry Fink himself, which has been, I think, a real surprise when Larry Fink came out with those flight quality statements about Bitcoin. But I would say it is the long-standing narrative on Bitcoin. This has been almost always the narrative: corporate treasuries buying Bitcoin and so on and so forth. And that roughly 1 year period when Bitcoin was referred to as a risk asset, that was the anomaly, really. And of course, this safe haven narrative on Bitcoin is also helped by what's happening on the macro front, right? As you mentioned, earlier in the year, the U.S. banking crisis, the escalating U.S. government debt, the credit downgrade of the United States, and as you said, the the geopolitical instability definitely helps.
Yeah. But did we actually need this change of narrative? I mean, November and December are usually positive sentiment times for Bitcoin. I mean, why is that?
There can be multiple reasons. Really, it's year-end bonuses. People suddenly have money to invest. Tax considerations, that of course varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but in some key jurisdictions, maybe holiday sentiment, people giving Bitcoin as Christmas present. There can be numerous reasons for it, but it is definitely very, very distinct and very observable. So if you look at the history of the crypto market and Bitcoin specifically, Q4 has historically outperformed all the other quarters by a lot.
Yeah. So taking a step back and just looking at maybe the anatomy of a rally, what type of factors do you think would drive the rally or perhaps puncture a rally that people should be looking for?
Yeah, it's definitely there are risks. I would say a surprise denial from the SEC would really puncture the rally now, because it would be a surprise. Also, if the ETFs, the spot ETFs are approved, if the inflows then disappoint, that would also be a challenge to the market. The expectation is, of course, for very significant inflows into the newly, hopefully approved Bitcoin ETFs. Analysts are mentioning some very, very bullish numbers that they expect to see. And even Larry Fink said that he sees a lot of demand from BlackRock customers. So if the reality turns out to be disappointing, that would be a problem. And of course, it's very important for a sustained bull market that it is broad-based, right? So that there is follow-through in terms of increased on-chain activity for multiple sectors, projects, a proliferation of use cases, projects with strong user growth. So we need to see this become broad-based and sustained, and not just about, of course, the Bitcoin ETF approval. Sure.
I mean, of course, it's not just Bitcoin, but on the Ethereum front, one of the other big players there. Would you think that a spot ETH ETF, bit of a tongue twister, might follow Bitcoin? But certainly Ethereum's not making the same headlines as Bitcoin at the moment. I mean, what do you think is happening here? And what's your sort of long-term view on the roadmap for Ethereum?
Yeah, interesting. It's Ethereum has been a major underperformer, and in fact, it's underperformed ever since the merge last year, which everybody at the time saw as a catalyst for outperformance, and it's been absolutely the opposite. Just very quickly, you mentioned a potential Ethereum spot ETF as well. Once a Bitcoin spot ETF is approved, and I think that. It's very hard to imagine that it would be very hard to justify a denial now that there are ETFs, futures ETFs on Ethereum, if there is a spot ETF, to say that there cannot be a spot ETF on Ethereum. So I think that's very likely. And there have been applications already filed. So I think that's very likely. But generally, Ethereum has suffered from a lot of negative news flow, some of it very unjustified. I think for an interpretation that's an unfair interpretation of kind of what really is going on fundamentally. And some of it, of course, this down cycle in the crypto market, because the headlines were falling transaction volumes and falling transaction fee income for the protocol. Ethereum again turned slightly inflationary earlier. This is now in the last couple of weeks, correct? It's again slightly deflationary, but all of this was very negative news flow. And the interpretation, for example, the growth of layer 2s, right? It was seen as it's coming at the expense of Ethereum, but that's kind of just the optics of a bearish environment. But actually, this is Ethereum's scaling strategy, scaling through layer 2s. it's a good strategy. And with the next upgrade that's being implemented, the surge, that's going to basically turbocharge the layer 2 scalability on Ethereum, I think it can, especially with rising volumes in a more bullish environment, that interpretation can very quickly adjust and be seen as Ethereum is using a very good scaling strategy. Yeah. And it's good news. Or just to mention also the staking queue, the staking entry queue disappearing was also interpreted as a negative, but actually that's the balance that we want. We don't want an exit or entry queue, really. We want it for people to be able to go in and out as they need to or as they want to. So all of these have all been taken for a while as bad news for Ethereum, and the price has outperformed so much. I think on any turnaround and of course increased activity in a more bullish environment, there can be a lot of upside there.
Yeah. So your fundamental view is not really changed by these headlines?
No, I think the interpretation was either sort of unfairly or unjustly negative. It's actually, for example, on the layer 2, it's a good scaling strategy, yet the optics were like it's coming at the expense of Ethereum. I don't think that's the case. Or it was just simply this down cycle with falling volumes, which as soon as it's not a down cycle, the news flow on that suddenly turns, right? Ethereum is already deflationary again, even just from the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. In the past, Bitcoin has often led some rallies, leading the way for others. But it seems that right now it's not only Bitcoin sentiment getting momentum, but other tokens kind of making progress, but also progress in their own right. Would you mind talking just about some of the other ones that you think are making some positive progress from your point of view?
Yes, certainly. And this is very important for the market. And it's been really good to see that straight away, the initial move was Bitcoin. And very quickly after that, Bitcoin basically took a pause, and a lot of tokens and projects with good fundamentals caught up very, very quickly. So already for October, there have been quite a few projects where the fundamentals are strong, that actually really outperformed even Bitcoin for October. So the fact that we're seeing the rally widening so quickly is I think very positive. So of course, some of the ones to highlight, there have been several, which is very good. Solana has been a standout, where basically the narrative and the sentiment really turned around. Developers are moving back to Solana. There's actually a lot of excitement in the developer community around basically with Ethereum having the modular versus Solana, the integrated scaling, and that both of them, some people prefer the one, some people argue for the other, but basically there's a strong community behind both, and both of them are legitimate, and they're sort of credible competitors to each other, right? So that's been an interesting story, and of course the applications again growing on Solana, and there was this sort of the OPOS, the only possible on Solana projects, and so that's been definitely one standout. Of course, the AI linked crypto tokens in the Web3 infrastructure sector, that's an obvious story, and there have been very positive developments there. And then we are also seeing interesting, developments and movements in the DeFi sector, specific to maybe situations for various projects. But of course, the rising volumes in the market are good for the DeFi sector in general. And one other interesting point is we're also seeing tokens that are adjusting the tokenomics. Fee switches are being discussed, or even kind of entirely maybe relaunching the token, or somehow altering the tokenomics that bring more value, drive more value to the token. Those projects have done well, and I also see that as a very positive development, because it shows that the market is more conscious of how value is actually created for the token, and protocols then also see that if they drive value to the token, then obviously there'll be performance that follows. So the early signs are very encouraging.
Yeah, very good. So I think we're pretty much out of time there, but thank you for kind of unpacking the fake news, but real rally, what's going on also behind Bitcoin and also others which are showing some promising signs of progress as well. So, but thank you everyone for joining today's session. Please visit the website or follow us on social media, LinkedIn, to download a copy of the November House View. But once again, thank you, Katalin, very much. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and everybody take care. Thanks, Katalin.
Thanks.